Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC and today I'm back in a Vauxhall Victor from 1960 and I'm really excited to show you this car today. And in fact, it's a car which people have asked for and I've never been able to get until today. So really hope you enjoy the video. We're going to go for a walk around the outside, have a look inside, I'm going to talk you through the dash and then we're going to take her out for a drive and I'll tell you what she drives like. So let's go and start having a look around this amazing Vauxhall Victor. Ask somebody today what they think when you say Vauxhall, and no doubt it'll be something like the Corsa. But this beautiful Victor represents not only a different era of motoring, but in my opinion, an era when Vauxhall had style. The Victor name ran under Vauxhall from 1957 until 1976 and had been added to the range to fill the family-sized car gap left by the Wyvern, which was discontinued just before the launch of the first Victor. Although it's really interesting because whilst this car was still there to appeal to the family market, the Victor was actually 4 inches shorter than the Wyvern, which goes against everything we see nowadays with cars getting bigger and bigger as a way of evolving. Now, the designer of this car, David Jones, had been with Vauxhall for circa 20 years. He was given the brief of designing the Victor and told, "Bring GM styling to the UK market," which is kind of why this car looks like nothing else you would see on the UK market at the time. Now, with several cars sitting under the Victor name, each one is given a naming convention. So this one is the F Series Victor. The first of the Victors, with this being Mark II, and they were made from February 1957 all the way through until 1961, although the FB Series Victor, which launched in September 1960, so there is a little bit of crossover on these two models. Now, the Victor was a really big hit and it sold an incredible 390,000 cars in less than 4 years and outsold the Wyvern that it had replaced by more than 3 to 1 and was briefly Britain's most popular export car, which may have been in part due to the fact it looks so deliciously American. And in fact, it takes styling cues from the, in my opinion, super stylish 55 Chevy Bel Air. But we'll talk about that more later on. So interestingly, despite decent sales, it wasn't everybody's cup of tea. And in fact, a lot of journalists at the time weren't impressed with it for many reasons, from the column change to the finish on it. They just weren't keen. And the same goes for many conservative Brits who felt it was a little bit too flashy and a little bit too American. But on the other side of the pond, the American buyers felt it was just a bit small because, as we know from one of Tom's last cars, American cars at the time were really trumping that bigger and better vibe. So this was a bit of a weird car to come into the market. Now, sadly, despite selling a fair few units, there are very few of these cars left. And actually, this is the very first early Victor I've ever seen in the flesh. Although viewers at home have been requesting one of these since early iDriveAClassic days. So perhaps out of sight, out of mind isn't always true. Now, coming back to the car, the four-door we see here today is the only body style available. Vauxhall felt that a two-door or a convertible just weren't necessary. And they even went one step further because in 1958, the Estate Victor arrived, a year into production, and it welcomed the first estate/station wagon, more appropriate wherever you are, to the Vauxhall lineup. Now, coming back to the American styling cue I mentioned earlier, the transmission unit on this is a 3-speed, fully synchro on forward gear, column change. But we'll see that later on when we go for a drive and I'll demo it for you as well. Spoiler, it's not as easy as some of the others that I've tested. Now, this was actually, although slightly different, a massive step up from previous Vauxhall gearboxes because they hadn't all come with Synchron first as a given. So this car, whilst it was slightly bizarre in its styling for some people, actually marked a massive step change from the Wyvern experience. Now, although this is badged Vauxhall England, the suspension is borrowed from American General Motors, and it sports coil springs and double wishbones to the front and hypoid axle on semi-elliptic leaf springs on rear. That's written in the comment section below if you didn't catch that. Unsurprisingly, it is on drum brakes all round, which was exactly what I expected. And the car we're testing today hasn't been changed from this, so we'll be able to give you the true driving experience on this one. Now, for engine buffs out there, this is a 1.5 overhead valve, and at the time of the F-Series production, this was the only engine on offer and gives us an impressive top speed of around 75 miles per hour and somewhere in the region of 30 to 35 miles per gallon. So where does that kind of perform against other cars? It's not too bad speed-wise, it's good, but it's a tad thirstier than something like a Morris Minor or an Anglia that's probably going to get 35 plus on a good run. Now, with this being a popular export car and a favourite in overseas market, it makes sense that they were made abroad too. So as well as production in the UK, they were also made in Australia and Belgium, and if you're watching this from abroad, you may know this as an Envoy or a Vauxhall Voyager. Now, you probably recognise today's backdrop, and that's because I've actually borrowed two cars off Tom. So if you saw the Fury video the other week, that was also his car, and this is as well. He's come a long way from Morris Minors. Now, enough from me, because I wanted to hand over to Tom to tell us about this car because he's had it a while and I wanted to get his perspective. So, over to you, Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom. I own this Vauxhall Victor. I've owned it for about 5 years. It was originally parked up for quite a long time in a garage, so it was a bit of a garage find. Last taxed in 1992. Everything was seized on it when I first bought the car, so all the brakes were seized on, the engine didn't run, the clutch was stuck on, the fuel tank was clogged, so it took a bit of recommissioning work to get it back on the road. But as the car looks today, this is what it looked like when it came out of the garage. I've not done any cosmetic work to it in any way. The interior is how it was when I first saw the car. So really, it's in quite good shape considering the age of it. The original seller of the car dealer, is in Coventry. They're still a Vauxhall dealer to this day. They have very recently sold their old dealership and moved to a new premises, which is a bit of a shame, but I think the building's still there, so I should probably go and pay it a visit one day. But yeah, the Vauxhall itself to drive is really, really nice. Really enjoy it, especially the colour, the American styling, the wraparound windscreen. Very echoes the American style of the late 50s, early 60s, so something very different to be driving around in 1960 when the rest of the vehicles on the roads were quite drab, boring colours, browns, greys, blacks, greens. So this really did turn a few heads back in 1960, but I think it probably still turns heads to this day.
I have been so excited to show you this car for ages, and it is a real privilege to bring you inside because it looked pretty jolly and blue from the outside, but it looks even more blue inside. Now, first of all, I'm going to start over here by the glove box. Now, as we open it up, and I know that it's not the best fitted glove box, but now as we open it up, you can see that not only do we have a lot of room inside there, we've also got the original dealer plate. Now, as we move into the centre of the dash, we see our first optional extra. Now, this optional extra is the radio. So these weren't fitted as standard. Like many cars of this era, this was something you had to buy on top. But it's really nice that it not only is being retained in the car, but still works as well, although you have only got that long wave option. So as we come down into the centre of the dash, we have got a little ashtray which is filled with some Monopoly tokens, and spoiler, you can't claim those this year. And then either side of that we've got these little silver dial things. So as you can see, that's quite stiff to move, but those are your two heater controls for either side, so for your passenger and your driver. Now, I will say that I'm not entirely sure if they were still fitted even if you didn't get the heater. That's right, the heater was something you had to pay extra for, and the heater is located just down here. Now, I did skip over one thing, the C, pretty obvious, that's a choke. Now, one of the absolute joys of taking old cars out is that occasionally you stumble across really weird features that manufacturers put in and you think, that's really odd. So you see this is your key, so you can see here. Now, we are going to start it up properly in just a second. So as you can see, that's where it should be. But watch this, you turn it once and you see these things like this. Watch this. So pull that out. And this is actually designed so that even if I haven't got my key, I can still start the car. So you turn that. How weird is that? To the right hand side of your key, you've got these two controls that look like Rolos. This one is for your wipers, it pops out twice for those 2 speeds, and then to the right of that you've got your lights, so you've got your side and your headlights on that as well. Sorry, it's a bit shaky. So you've got your speedo across the top there, so it goes from 0 to a very optimistic 90, and then you've got, and this is something I really like on cars actually, is you've got separate arrows for your indicators, and over here you've got your temperature gauge for your water. Again, a really nice upgrade from the Morris Minor that Tom originally had, and over on your right hand side you've got a fuel gauge as well. Now, I was talking about where this car excels, and for me, although it's simple, it feels like the detail's been put into the right things. My only criticism would be that you had to pay extra for your windscreen washer jets, which the original owner of this car hasn't done, and they haven't been fitted afterwards. So for me, if I was buying this, I would definitely get those fitted because that would be so annoying. However, whilst the windscreen washer jets were optional extra, do you know what wasn't? Double speed wipers. And that for me feels like a massive oversight on Vauxhall's part, because twin speed wipers are amazing and you don't realise how much you love them until you've got them and you haven't had them before. And it's just that windscreen washer jet which is missing for me. But a very small criticism of a car which so far is, in my opinion, exceptional. Now, although we're on a dry screen, which I know is going to wind some of you up, I just wanted to show you the speed of those wipers. So we turn them once and we turn them twice. I'm really excited to show you this because usually everything's down on the floor, but I do like a good column change. Now, it's very stiff, so I apologise if I'm being a little bit cautious as I change the gears. But so as always, we put our foot down on the clutch and we bring this in towards us and down for first. We come back up into neutral. We go up into second and then down into third, and we bring it up again and we just check we're in neutral there, just like you would with a normal gearbox. Now, to get into reverse, we bring it towards us and up. So realistically, with this only having 3 gears on, we're probably going to end up getting up into third and not really needing to change that much. So I wanted to show you that now, and we'll show you as we set off getting up into that third gear. Now let's start this car up so you can hear what she sounds like. That sounds so nice, but let's go and have a listen from the back exhaust so you can hear how it would sound if you were behind me in a queue of traffic. We're going to start off by going up into third gear, so I'm going to be quiet now. Now, one of the beauties of this car is not only is it simple, but it seems like it's going to be pretty easy to drive, because although we've got the column change and it is a little bit stiff, that isn't a massive concern, because the way it's being geared up is that for most of the time you only need to be in second or third gear. Now, this car is from 1960, which means that safety features are perhaps not quite in line with what you'd expect of a car of today. So we have got drum brakes all round, we haven't got any discs on this at all, and it hasn't been retrofitted either. And as well as that, you've probably noticed I'm not wearing a seatbelt, and that is because we don't actually have seatbelts in this car. So it might put off a few of you that were maybe looking to buy some of these, but remember, without something like the trafficators on the semaphores and the doors, seatbelts are something that you can retrofit to this car. Now, we've got that 1500 under the bonnet, so I expected this to be, I know it probably sounds a bit silly, I expected this to be a little bit sluggish, but actually it's keeping up with traffic quite well. Although today everybody seems to be out on the road, so we're not actually picking up any great speed. Now, the clutch biting point in this is a little bit high, so I feel like I keep over revving the car, but I think it's one of those things that you would just have to get used to. Now, as per your cars of this era, you wouldn't expect it to have power assisted steering. I mean, we don't even have washer jets on the windscreen wipers, but it's surprisingly easy to drive. Now, the steering is very light, which I would expect of a car of this size, and it's quite responsive too, so even a small move of the wheel is giving us an almost instantaneous response, which you don't always get on cars of this era. Now, in terms of cabin noise, it is quite noisy, but there is a lack of dash rattles, knocks, percentage-wise anyway, that you would expect of a car of this era. I can hear there's something over here which is rattling, and I can hear this glove box rattling, and there's a couple of other bits, but by and large it's pretty straight in terms of how many knocks and rattles you would expect of a car of this era. Although we have quite a small rear view mirror, because you've got this wraparound windscreen, which, and I probably should mention this while we're having a look round actually and driving round, is that when Vauxhall designed this, it was with the American dream in mind. So when they designed this car, they looked over stateside for a bit of inspiration. And the design on this comes from a 55 Chevy Bel Air, which would explain things like your wraparound windscreen and all your glass, and things like the fin detailing on the back as well, plus all the gratuitous chrome that you see all over the car. Now I wanted to show you a bit of a gear change in action on the road. So we go from second down into third. Now I know I keep talking about that clutch, it is really, really high, and the biting point is near impossible to find, but I think it's one of those things that you would find as you learn to drive the car, and to me it's a really, really attractive prospect because it's a really nice car to look at. Look, I'm often won over by looks on a car, and it's also really nice to drive. It's very responsive. If you've never driven column change before, you do get used to it quite quickly. It's not actually that difficult, and on this it's not as simple as when we took out that Ford Zodiac. It feels a lot stiffer, but I think once you've got your head around it, it wouldn't be that difficult to drive. Now I've come to the end of my test drive, and I'm still finding this column change a little bit harder than I did when we went out in the Zodiac, but I wouldn't let that affect your opinion of this car, because for me this is one of the nicest cars of the era that I've ever been given the keys to. And you know what, credit to Tom as well, because to take a car which hasn't been on the road in a very long time and turn it round into not only a car which can be driven, but a car which is driven all the time is a massive feat, because cars like this, you can't get every single part. And well done to Tom, because it has been a real pleasure to drive this car today, and I've just had the best time, and it's been so nice showing you it as well, because it's very easy to get hold of something like a Morris Minor to show you, but to get hold of something like this, it is a rare treat. So I really hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been very fun taking you for a little tour back to the 1960s, my favourite decade, and I really hope you've enjoyed the video. So wherever you are in the world, take care and drive safely.